He was just 2 years old, and with his mum running errands, she let go of his hand to pay the cashier, and he wandered away. Two 10-year-old boys spotted him, lured him toward them, took him by the hands, and led him away. They took him to a remote location, pushing and kicking at him the whole time. Some people questioned the two kids with the crying toddler, but they lied, saying he was their brother, and nobody intervened further. They took him to a secluded spot and tortured him. I don't want to recount the torture details, it's just too gruesome. They left his body on some railroad tracks, hoping that being run over by a train would make it look like an accident. He was found days later, his body severed in half by a train. The boys were caught and became the youngest convicted M-word in British history. Security footage from the day they took James shows them watching children picking out a target. And they were just kids themselves. They were released at 18. One of them is back in jail for possessing child abuse photos on his computer. The most terrifying thing about this for me is that my own son is only 2 now, and James's M-word were just children too. It was premeditated and intentional and entirely random. Just a momentary lapse in attention, and he became a target of 2 M-word children. Children, to think that children younger than my stepson are capable of such a thing. ... Oog. Everything about this case is just horrifying.
Daniela Rasileto was a Lithuanian girl who was sold as a sex slave in Sweden in late 1999. Her mother had abandoned her when she was 14 years old and left for the USA when she was 15 to 16 years old. She was sent from Lithuania by an older man who pretended to be her boyfriend. He promised her a job as a berry picker in Sweden and gave her a fake passport. When she arrived in Sweden, a man welcomed her and locked her in an apartment in Malta. He said she had to pay him 20,000 kronor for her passport and the transportation from Lithuania to Sweden. She soon understood she would be working as a prostitute. Rasileto was forced to work as a prostitute for 2 weeks before she escaped the apartment she was imprisoned in. On the 7th of January 2000, she jumped off a bridge in Malta after escaping from the apartment and getting men who pretended they would help her. She died later at a hospital. Her case stirred much debate on In January 2007, Knoxville, Tennessee, was shaken by one of its most heartbreaking tragedies, the loss of Channing Christian, 21, and Christopher Newsom, 23. Channing was a student at the University of Tennessee, studying sociology. Friends described her as full of life, with a smile that could light up any room. She loved golf and spending time with family. Chris, her boyfriend, was a former high school baseball standout. He was talented with his hands, a skilled carpenter, and was known for his kind heart. On the night of January 6, the couple planned a simple evening together, movies, then a party with friends, but they never made it to the party. Friends tried calling and texting, but there was no answer. Later, Channing's SUV was seen near a house on Chipman Street in North Knoxville. That house would soon become the center of the investigation. When Channing and Chris didn't return home, their families reported them missing. For days, loved ones searched and prayed for answers. Finally, heartbreaking news came. Both had been found, and police quickly tied the case to several people connected to the Chipman Street house. The investigation revealed the couple had been victims of a horrific crime. Over the following weeks, 5 people were arrested. Each went through trials and appeals in the years that followed. For the families, those trials meant reliving the pain again and again. But they stood strong, fighting for justice for Channing and Chris. Even today, their families continue to honor their memory through community events, scholarships, and by sharing their story so they are never forgotten. Channing would have been 40 this year. Chris would have turned 42. Instead, their names live on in the hearts of family, friends, and a community that will always remember the love they shared. It has been one of the darkest and most haunting cases in Indianapolis history. The tragic story of 16-year-old Sylvia Likens, October 26, 1965. Sylvia Likens was a 16-year-old American teenager who suffered terrible mistreatment at the hands of her caregiver, Gertrude Benishevsky, along with some of Benishevsky's children and neighborhood kids. The abuse went on for 3 months before Sylvia tragically passed away. Sylvia's younger sister Ginny was sometimes forced to take part in the mistreatment, even though she didn't want to. After everything came to light, Gertrude Benishevsky, her oldest daughter Paula, her son John, and 2 neighborhood youths, Coy Hubbard and Richard Hobbs, were all brought to trial in 1966. They were convicted for their roles in what had happened. At the trial, Deputy Prosecutor Leroy New described the case as the most shocking ever seen in court. while Gertrude's own defense attorney said Sylvia had been subjected to unthinkable treatment. After 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found Gertrude guilty and sentenced her to life in prison. Though she was later released on parole in 1985, Paula was convicted of second-degree charges and released in 1972. Hobbs, Hubbard, and John were convicted of lesser charges and served under 2 years before being released in 1968. Fatima Quintana. On February 5, 2015, Fatima, a 12-year-old girl, was intercepted by 3 neighbors. They attempted to rape her, and Fatima fought with all her might to defend herself and reach her home, which was just a few meters away. These 3 men, angered by the girl's anger, stabbed her more than 90 times and tortured her. Even after this, Fatima was still alive in total agony. Upon realizing this, her 3 neighbors smashed her skull by throwing rocks at her. In October 2021, the 3 perpetrators were convicted. Jose Juan Hernandez Tecraseña received life imprisonment. Luis Ángel Ataide Reyes was sentenced to 73 years and 8 months in prison. Maisiel Ataide Reyes, a minor at the time of the crime. He was initially released due to lack of evidence, but was later rearrested and sentenced to 5 years. He is currently free. Unfortunately, Fatima's family has had to travel across Mexico, fleeing retaliation from the families of these individuals who are also involved in organized crime. Jose Juan and Luis Angel's sentences could still be reduced to parole. Fatima's family is still fighting to ensure that the government upholds its promise of justice and that these 2 scumbags are not released.
Luis Ravito. He is by far one of the most disturbing criminals I have ever heard of. He was active in Colombia in the 90s and would lure vulnerable young boys into the jungle by offering them things like food, money, or jobs. He would make them walk for miles so they'd be too exhausted to resist or escape. What he did afterwards was beyond horrific, far worse than most people could even imagine. He was convicted of 189 lives. 189, but it's believed the real number may have been 300 to 400. Mass graves have even been found containing the remains of his victims. Luis's actions were so extreme that at first the police thought it had to be the work of a cartel, a militant group, or even some kind of cult, because they couldn't believe one man could do so much damage. The most shocking part, he only received a sentence of around 20 years, since Colombia didn't have life imprisonment or the death penalty at the time. But before he could ever be released, he passed away from cancer. His crimes were so widespread that wherever he lived, reports of children going missing or being harmed would suddenly increase. Sean Dugas was a former reporter from Florida with a passion for collecting Magic, the Gathering cards. His collection was worth over $100,000, his pride and joy. In 2012, Sean suddenly vanished. Friends were told he had moved away, but weeks later, investigators uncovered the truth. His body was found in Georgia, stuffed inside a plastic container and buried under concrete in the backyard of a friend's house. The killer, William.horror, a man desperate for money. He murdered Sean and stole his valuable card collection. In a chilling twist, he even sold some of Sean's own cards to buy the very container that became his coffin. Cormier's twin brother helped move the body, but it didn't take long for police to piece everything together. The jury needed just over an hour to convict William of first-degree murder. He was sentenced to life in prison. A man's love for his hobby turned into the reason for his death, and his priceless collection became the motive for one of the most disturbing true crimes tied to a game of fantasy. They called it the miracle of modern living, Teflon, a slick, invisible coating that made pans non-stick and life easier. But behind the shine was something poisonous. At DuPont's factories, workers noticed strange things. Their teeth turning black, their skin blistering, women giving birth to babies with rare defects, livestock near the plant dying suddenly, their organs swollen and diseased. The chemical was called C8. It never left the body. Once it entered your blood, it stayed there forever. For decades, DuPont knew. Internal memos described tumors in lab animals. Reports linked C8 to cancer, thyroid disease, and birth defects. But the company kept producing it, dumping waste into rivers and landfills, letting it drift into the air. Today, more than 99% of humans on Earth have traces of C8 in their blood. From frying pans to rainwater, it spread everywhere. The world thought it was buying convenience. But what we really bought was contamination. And the worst part, Teflon's curse doesn't die. C8 will linger in our bodies and the environment for centuries to come. In Phnom Penh, Cambodia, there's a place the locals still whisper about. Tuol Sleng Prison, known as S21. During the Khmer Rouge regime in the late 1970s, this ordinary school was transformed into a nightmare. More than 14,000 men, women, even children, were brought here, accused of being traitors. Most never left alive. The classrooms became torture chambers. Windows were covered in barbed wire so no one could escape, not even by jumping. Prisoners were forced to sign false confessions before being sent to the killing fields. Ode S21 is a museum. Tourists walk through silent halls lined with haunting photographs, faces of those who never came back. Locals say if you stay too long in the dark rooms, you can still hear chains clinking, or the faint cries of voices begging to be remembered.
April 16,